Samuel and 24. And we've been studying the life of David, and we're going to continue that. And this message was real helpful. We thank you, by the way. There's more and more people are joining us on Thursday night. We have the same service. It's here at 6:30. If you have a week where you can't make it, it's a great time to show up, and it fills some seats. When it's not daylight savings, this place has been overflowing with people, and it opens up space for other people. So thank you. We had a great time with this on Thursday night. The message today is called How to Act When People Hurt Me. I'm guessing I'm not super off topic here. I think we can find our way to this together. It's this. I'll just read the beginning and then we'll get to it. This is 1 Samuel 24. This is Saul and David. We've been learning about this. Saul's the king. David is the presumed future king. And Saul is chasing after David, trying to make sure that he never becomes king. So it starts like this. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the wild goat rocks. And he came to the sheepfolds by the way where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now, David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. This is the experience of betrayal. This is the experience of, I just don't understand why. This is the experience of David, still a young man, wanting nothing but to serve God with his life, and this king that he'd served under, all of a sudden turning on him. It all kind of started at the end of that David and Goliath story. We've talked about that recently, where Saul doesn't want to fight Goliath. David's this young guy, so he's willing to go into it. David kills Goliath, and when they're on their way back, there's this, we talked about this, all the girls come out into the street and they start singing, "Saul's killed his thousands, but David is 10,000s." And jealousy sets in, and now what was like a second son or someone that Saul cared about, he's trying to kill him. The story here that we're getting to says that he finally kind of decides, Saul, there in verse 2, once and for all right, I got to get rid of this guy. So he takes his 3,000 best warriors. David has, as best as we could tell, a few dozen guys, and they're hiding like way out. I'm not talking like from here, like not out to the country like Crystal Lake, like really out to the country, like those parts of Illinois that nobody goes to unless you're trying to drive off to college or something, like way, way out, way, way out, way, way out. And they're just hiding out there, and Saul gets like a tip, and he says, "We're going to go get him. We're going to find him. We're done with this now." And amazingly enough, these are those little things that happen all the time that foolish people tend to call coincidence. Wise people tend to see as a providential God. This thing happens. Saul's walking along, and he says, "I need to go to the bathroom." And so he says, I guess that's the way they rolled. He says, "I'm going to go into this cave over here." And coincidentally, that's the cave that David and his guys are all the way far back in. And we'll see what happens. But it starts with a pattern. We don't get, here in this story, a ton of access into David's kind of internal thinking, but we have the Psalms, which many of them David wrote, that give us a window into how David was feeling and experiencing these things. And a lot of people are asking this question: why does God allow betrayal? Like, I remember he and I stood at the front of a church and we promised that we'd be faithful to each other, and I've kept that promise, but he hasn't. Why did God let that happen? I worked at this company, and the idea was kind of like I was going to do my part and they were going to take care of me, and then somewhere along the way, like, I don't even really know what happened. All the stuff they said was going to happen didn't happen, and now I'm trying to figure out what's next. And the question that a lot of people are asking is, but why does God allow betrayal? There is like not many things more brutal than the way sometimes that teenagers and young 20-somethings can treat their parents. And parents have this experience like, sure, I wasn't perfect, but I did my best. I gave it everything I had. Like, I did the best I could. And I certainly don't deserve to be talked to like that. Why does God allow that to happen? David's pointing at this in Psalm chapter 10 and verse 1 when he says, "Why, O Lord, do you stand far away? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble?" Like it was pretty obvious, I'm guessing, that like my son was just on the stage a minute ago talking, and I was trying to just like find as far into the corner as I could find, because I wanted him to talk to you, not look over at me the whole time, which completely didn't work because he couldn't stop looking over at me. Well, why? Because he wants to know where Dad is. And human beings want to know where God is. And we can understand intellectually that God is with us all the time. But what David is pointing at here isn't, does my mind know? He's pointing at the way that it feels. When bad news comes from the doctor, when financial challenges are all over the place, when I don't know if my family's going to find their way through this thing this time, there's that feeling, God, where are you? Where are you? I'm guessing David was back in the corner of that cave, and somehow he realizes that it's Saul the king, and he was having that, like, where are you, God? And secondarily, he was undoubtedly saying a second thing, the personal thing that a lot of us say. Not just why does God allow this generally, but why me? Like, I think if we're honest, we understand that because of sin in the world, cancer exists. Because of sin in the world, there's bankruptcy and there's infertility and there's betrayal. And it's easier to accept it in theory than it is to figure out a way to digest. But why me? Why am I the one? I think David points at this too. And this is Psalm 22. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh God, he says, I cry by day, but you don't answer, and by night, but I find no rest. And what makes it challenging for a lot of people to worship the holy God that we were singing about a moment ago, and to accept the good God that you often hear people like in a spot like I'm in right now talking about, is it often doesn't feel that good. And there's this like, why me? So the story continues there in verse 4. It says that the men of David said to him, here's the day of which the Lord has said to you, behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you. This is like maybe the thing I've ever read in the Bible I had the least trouble picturing. I don't know what your kind of friends were like when you were young, but if I was somewhere with all my idiot friends, and like our biggest enemy showed up and we could get away with it, of course they were like, yeah, man, this is it, this is it, this is it, this is it. But I will say, notice that these guys, this isn't what God wants David to do. But notice that the guys who are telling David, you should just go kill Saul right now, notice that they're using God as the reason they should do it. Which this is not really what the message is about today, but it's just as an aside. Just because somebody's holding a Bible in their hand and telling you what you should do doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving you good advice or they're telling you the right thing to do. Lots of people have gotten a lot of really bad advice from somebody who is holding a Bible and saying this is what God wants. Can I get a witness? Yeah. All right, Patrick, you woke up right there, Patrick, when I started talking about that. Yeah. So it says that then David arose, verse 4, and it says that he stealthily cut off the corner of Saul's robe. So I know, and I'm not trying to get like weird with it, but apparently Saul's going to the bathroom. And while he's going to the bathroom, he goes and cuts off a part of his robe. Now, this may seem sort of innocuous or insignificant, but you got to kind of put yourself into the context of 3,000 years ago. This act was far from meaningless. David cutting off the corner of Saul's robe, which was a highly decorated piece of clothing designed to show who the king was from far away. Him cutting off the corner of it was making this robe now in a state of non-compliance. So like, according to God's law, Saul shouldn't have been allowed to wear the robe. It was sort of a passive-aggressive way of saying, ha, 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 now you can't be king anymore. Verse 5, it says that, so afterward, it says that David's heart struck him because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Like you can write, his conscience is like, oh, why did I do that? He said to his men, verse 6, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing as he is the Lord's anointed. So David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul. And Saul rose up and left the cave and went on his way. The point that David is making here to the guys isn't Saul's a good king. The point that he's making is God puts people in place and God takes people out of place. And we don't get the right to sort of decide when we get to take matters into our own hands. So we're going to have all kinds of elections this year. And the people of God get like, I don't know, I guess we get one vote, if you live in the city, 2 or 3 maybe. And then whoever ends up in place is the person that God has allowed in place. That doesn't mean that it's the righteous person or the right person or the person that I want. God often gives you a boss. Who could say as a witness, you've had a really bad boss in your life and looking back on it, it taught you a few things? Anybody who can? Yeah, a lot of people, yeah. God puts authorities in their place, even allows them into place. And the point that they're making here is we don't get to take justice in our own hands just because we can see what's wrong with someone else. It's drawing our attention to why does it matter how I respond? So Saul betrayed David. Full stop. He treated him poorly. He treated him unfairly. He treated him wrongly. David did not deserve the way that he was treated, yet it was also wrong for David to take matters into his own hands. Both of those things were true, do you see? And this is the part that we get to have some kind of control over. We get to have control over what I do with the way that people treat me. Candidly, I've spent far too much time in my life thinking about why did they treat me this way, and not nearly enough time thinking about how am I going to respond as a result. I mean, it's like the world of grievance just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Have you been in one of those, actually in one of those places where something weird starts happening and then people start like pulling out their phones to tape whoever's there or to like videotape whatever's happening, record, videotape, I sound like 1,000 years old, record. Because they're going to put it on a VHS tape and But have you been in that environment? I've been in like a lot of things like that lately where people are like, I'm recording you, I'm recording you, I'm recording you, I'm recording you. Because like now there's this weird social cachet that people can find by being a compelling victim and getting a bunch of people being like, that's so wrong, they shouldn't have done that, blah, 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 blah. I saw this week in New York State that there was a high school basketball team that sued the referee that they thought made a bad call at the last second of the game that kept them from going to the state championship. And they were trying to go to court to get the thing overturned to say, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. And I'm like, hey. You know what else wasn't fair? Dying on the cross for the sins of the world is the perfect sacrifice sent from God. That's a good one to use on your kids, by the way. I use that one, it's good. It's not fair. You know what else wasn't fair? Dying on the cross for your sins. Shut your mouth. Yeah. It wasn't fair. But just because David was treated wrong didn't mean it was okay for him to do wrong. Just because he got done wrong didn't mean it was okay for him to do wrong. This is one of the hardest lessons for us to learn. So the next part, it says that afterwards, so now Saul's leaving, David also arose and he went out of the cave and he called after Saul. He said, my Lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth and paid homage. This is David using his body to say, even if you're treating me wrong, you're still the king that God has put in place over me. And when Saul looked behind him, And then David said to Saul, he said, why do you listen to the words of men who say, behold, David seeks you harm? It's interesting because this is David's chance to speak. And he doesn't start by ripping him. He doesn't have like his big speech. He just starts with this question that I think you can feel the pain dripping off of. He says, I just don't get it. Like, why did this relationship have to break? Why did you do that? Why did you listen to them? Why did you start talking to her? Why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't you just tell me that you wanted me to do things in a different way? Why? It's this pain question a lot of people are stuck on. Why does it hurt so much? David doesn't start with, here's why I don't think you should have treated me this way. It's this hurt, like how? Psalm 6:6, I think, says this well. This is David writing, maybe right around this time. He says, I am weary with moaning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with my weeping. Anyone ever been there? Like I'm thinking about it when I'm going to bed, and I'm thinking about it when I wake up, rolling over in the middle of the night, and I'm thinking about it first thing in the morning, and I'm thinking, why on earth did I go to church? Because he's just bringing that thing into my mind right now that I've been trying so hard to stop thinking about. This is a person who's in, he says, why? Why? David continues speaking, now into verse 10. This gets a little long. This is his big speech. He says, behold, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you today into my hand in the cave, and some told me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not put out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand? For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and didn't kill you, you may know and see that there is no wrong and no treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it. So may the Lord judge, he says, between you and me. May the Lord avenge me against you, but my hand shall not be against you. Which is pretty good. He says, I hope you get what's coming to you, but I'm not going to do it. That might be a good one to use. I like that. As the proverb of the ancients, verse 13, he says, out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? He's talking about himself. He says, after a dead dog, after a flea? May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you, and see to it and plead my cause and deliver me from your hand. This is a person who's feeling a lot of pain, clearly. And he's saying, I could have, but I didn't. I could have, but I didn't. He's saying, whatever you got in your head that made you think that you should chase after me and try to kill me. What am I? I'm just one guy. I'm just nothing much. Just know this. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to lift my finger against you. That's David's big point. And it leads to this other question that I think a lot of us are asking. Have you ever asked this one? Why do things always work out for them? David's like, why are you coming after me for? Maybe you've been there, that friend that you have who doesn't seem to value their relationship, but it seems to be super healthy, and you wish yours could be like that. That person who their kids just seem to be thriving in a way that you, or their career, or maybe you're in that. I don't know how they can afford that thing or go that place or take that vacation, or I've made better choices than they've made, but yet still maybe that, that whole swirl around thing that can be so easy, that is, why do things work out for them better than they work out for me? David's talking about this in Psalm 73 when he says, I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. I felt that. Anyone ever felt that? It feels like the people that are doing the wrong thing are getting ahead. And Psalm 73 is an interesting read if you're ever in that space. This is David, and he's trying to work this out in his mind. The way it writes in verse 17, he says, finally I got to the sanctuary of God. I got into the presence of God, and I discerned their end. The way that David got past that question was by realizing that it may look temporarily like wicked people are getting ahead, but God's judgment maybe makes it different. I've always loved Psalm 73, this verse here in the translation that's not really a translation, the kind of reinterpretation. Just put that back up for a second. That is in the Message. Maybe you've read this before. He says, I was trying to figure it out, and all I got was a splitting headache. You ever rolled something over in your mind so many times? And you get to that point where you're like, there's nothing else to figure out. There's no more information. It just keeps giving me a headache. It says there in verse 16, as soon as David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, is this your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. I'll just pause there for 1 second. So Saul and David are going to do this cycle. They've done this before, and they've done it a few more times. Saul is like whatever jargon you want to use from a counselor you went to. He's all of the things. He's like toxic and narcissistic or whatever word you want to use. This is like a really good way of explaining it. He was going to kill him, that now he's crying, and in like 10 more minutes he's going to be trying to kill him again. Just throw out there, just because someone's crying doesn't mean their heart has changed. Anybody? Yeah. He said to David, oh. You're really liking that, the crying, yeah. You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. And you have declared this day how you've dealt with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now, behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. This may sound weird to you and to me, but this was common practice in that day and time, that when a king transitioned to a new king, the new king would kill all of the family members of the old king to make sure that nobody tried to go back to the throne. It's kind of like now, like whoever ends up president tries to put the old president's family all in prison. Whichever way? No? Two? Okay, yeah, I don't know. We're going to find our way together. So he says, I know you're going to be king, but just like, don't kill anybody that doesn't deserve to be killed. It's kind of his idea. David learns a lesson this day that we see him carry forward for a long time, which is he learns the lesson that, I wrote it down this way. This is a great space for this week, just something that's helpful. That was kind of the main thing if you want to get one main thing. Every action matters, even when it feels like doing a small wrong thing is no big deal. This is a lesson that we love to teach kids, and then we get older and it becomes easy to self-justify a lot of little corner cutting. It becomes easy to be like, well, the government will just waste it anyway, so I'll just only like sort of do my taxes honestly. It becomes real easy to be like, everybody else says they're working from home, but they're like off doing who knows what, so I'll just cut that corner. It's easy to cut the corner, all kinds of corners that are, and I guess it's just, we're saying that every action matters. David was wrong for taking even a little passive-aggressive action against Saul because it wasn't time. And David learns this lesson. 1 Samuel 24, he spares Saul's life. 1 Samuel 25, he spares the life of Nabal. We'll see that soon. 1 Samuel 26, David spares the life of Saul again. And what Saul asked for here, don't kill my descendants, all the way into 2 Samuel in chapter 9, decades later, we'll study this too sometime soon, David spares the life of Mephibosheth, even treating him as one of his own sons. David, right here, is at like kind of the bottom. and he is about to see God pour blessing on his life. He is about to get into that phase where he is going to win every battle and conquer every territory and rise to success in ways that truly he couldn't have imagined. And one of the reasons is he decided in his heart, I'm going to do what God wants me to do, no matter what they do. That's like, so we're in this time, right? Our age is very much the age of like, if they slap you, you slap them twice and even harder. And it's very much in fashion to clap back, as the kids would say. It's in one way, it's a good thing, right? That especially in our culture, women increasingly are taught, I think in a good way, to stand up for themselves. Awesome. But standing up for yourself doesn't mean taking God's job into your own hands. And so I just want you to bring to mind for a second, we're like really close to done now, and we're going to sing, and then we're going to be gone. That person that did you wrong. That person that you used to be married to, that person that betrayed you, that old boss that took advantage of you, that company that still has some money that you feel like is yours, that parent that right when you really needed them as you were growing up, they got real selfish and weren't taking care of you. Whatever that thing is, it can become so easy to sort of weigh out my behavior. Like, yeah, so I don't really like call mom back when she calls. Yeah, but she X and Y and Z. It can become real easy to measure out my behavior in contrast to theirs and then feel like I'm doing good because I'm not as bad as them. And what I'm taking from the text today and what I'm trying to encourage us towards is, what if Jesus had treated us like that? So what if Jesus had decided, I'm going to treat them in response to how they treated me? Every single person who can hear my voice right now would still be dead in our trespasses and sins. That the point of the cross is that we didn't deserve it at all. God demonstrated his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He came into the middle of our mess, and frankly, not just before we figured it out. A lot of us mostly all of us still don't really deserve it that much. I don't know what your week was like, but. And so the way that we respond to each other isn't based on how we've been responded to on earth. That the way that we treat, get it? David honored God by the way that he treated Saul, because he showed that he trusted what he believed was true about God in the future more than he believed what he felt pain from Saul in the present. He said, I'm not going to take one more step. I'm not going to do one more thing. And you're still king and the situation isn't changing and I can't fix it right here while I'm sitting here. But you know what I can do? I can say, God, I'm acting in a way that shows if you don't come through, I'm finished. If you don't come through, it's going to fall apart. I'm putting all my eggs, all my weight, all my trust on God. If you said, go this way, I'm going to go this way. And I wonder what might come into your life today, my life today, if we go back to trusting that God sees and get away from trying to find justice on our own behalf. Would you bow your head for just a second? I just want to give you a minute to gather up into your heart what we've talked about today. We've wasted an hour if God doesn't speak to us in truth about our own lives.